I want to turn now to Washington Post reporter David Nakamura. He's in Washington. David, the Senate, Senator Schumer, actually, he called this bipartisan deal a breakthrough. Is it really a breakthrough?
Yes, it's a breakthrough on the Senate side, at least for now. But as Nancy just said, there are a lot of questions remaining. And, I think what you've seen from the White House the past couple of days is they feel like they have the upper hand, given what happened in the past, the government shutdown a couple weeks ago, where you saw Democrats start to appear to get nervous over that they would take the blame for the shutdown, and within about 3 days agreed on some legislation to reopen the government. And I think while Democrats say, look, the president would own any shutdown, Trump was basically daring Democrats to go that direction yesterday when he said he would embrace and love a shutdown. It seemed like odd rhetoric for a White House to say, the head of the government, but I think Trump recognized that he feels he emboldened a little bit. And I also think that, Trump has tried to thrust any potential breakdown on immigration onto the Democrats. That's a more risky play, I think, for the president, given his hardline immigration stance. The public knows very well where he stands. And this looming deadline in March, where the Dreamers who are involved in DACA, about 700,000, would start to lose their work permits en masse. That's looming there. There's a court order that's put that on hold for now. But there is concern right now that it does not look likely an immigration deal can get done. And whether the House Democrats will hold the line and go toward a shutdown remains to be seen. But I think there's lots of political implications really for Democrats in this.
David, your paper today, there was a quote from Representative Gutierrez of Illinois saying he's obviously with the Latino bloc there. And he said that it would be any budget deal that does not protect Dreamers would represent, I'm quoting here, a complete betrayal of a key core principle. What are the chances you think that House Speaker Ryan agrees to Nancy Pelosi's demand to commit on a vote of immigration in the House?
It's hard to know. I think what he has signaled is that he does not support bringing any kind of immigration legislation forward if it doesn't have the White House support. And who would, be given the fact that if Trump comes out against a plan that is passed in either chamber on immigration, it would essentially doom it to some degree, with Trump threatening a veto. So I think that is the limit. I think in the House, it's harder to find that bipartisanship, as Nancy was mentioning. We've seen the immigration fail in the House in 2013 and 14, when the Senate passed a big sweeping immigration bill with bipartisan consensus. And I think the same dynamics hold true. We have the hardline right that does not support maybe a path to citizenship for the Dreamers that even Trump has started to support. And you have Democrats who are saying they don't support necessarily a wall, but especially cuts to legal immigration. So I think it looks very difficult for both sides to agree on an immigration deal, especially in the next few days when the deadline is Friday on this next spending bill.
Yeah. So Thursday at midnight, how much work still needs to be done before this can all get passed?
A lot more work. It always seems, though, it comes down to these deadlines, and if there is the will, and the conversations continue even now. If there's the will, it can happen quickly. We all see that come together. Nothing's agreed on until everything is. So I think the White House is keeping on this. No one thinks this Senate potential breakthrough is means that everything's a done deal. But I think you're going to see some of the Senate leaders and now the White House start to get behind it and see if they can push the House along.
Speaking of the White House, the president suggested yesterday that he'd take a government shutdown if there was no progress on immigration. There are multiple proposals out there. Where do you think those talks stand?
Well, I think that the White House basically sees the immigration deal as a way to, sort of promote the president's hardline agenda on immigration, with the cuts to the legal immigration side, significant funding for the border wall. When just a couple months ago, Dems were saying they'd give no money. Now there are some reports that Schumer has offered up to $25 billion. And the president is now calling for that in his plan. But I think also the White House is trying to say, look, we're being more willing to offer this citizenship path to as many as 1.8 million Dreamers, something that this president did not seem like he would want to do during the campaign, as a sort of an olive branch. Now, I think that's difficult to sort of square sometimes, because I think the White House also recognizes that getting those hardline provisions through in any kind of deal is something that Democrats don't really support. So they're trying to sort of have Democrats in a tough spot of, don't you support this path for the Dreamers, then you got to support this other stuff, which have been sort of, something the Democrats and their base have really been against for years.
David, I want to ask you about your own reporting on North Korea. Vice President Mike Pence says that the U.S. is preparing the toughest and most aggressive economic sanctions against the North. Do you think this is simply just a continuation of their pressure campaign, or is there something different at play here?
It's a continuation of what they call maximum pressure campaign. And, the vice president is now due to land in Seoul fairly soon. I think he's spent the overnight in Tokyo, where he's a couple days of meetings. But he's going to be there for the Olympics. They're going to continue to meet with leaders in the region, including the President Moon of South Korea, to demonstrate a resolve and a unified vision in East Asia against North Korean threat. You saw the president yet last week talk about it in his State of the Union. He had the defectors from North Korea visit the Oval Office. All of this is messaging saying, look, there might be some levels of engagement during the Olympics, but we're not going to, that's not what we want. We want the North to really demonstrate a commitment to denuclearization. The North has not shown any of that. Yeah. And so I think this is a continuation. The real question people have both in Seoul and Washington is, all this talk that the White House is ready to use a preventative strike if necessary, what that means. And there's no real clarity on that. I'm not sure the White House wants to give clarity because they like what's called operational surprise and the idea that the North won't know what's coming when, and so they may be more willing to deal. We'll see.
Speaking of clarity and showmanship, what is all this hype about this military parade that the president's interested in throwing?
He himself has been talking about it, as you know, and when he went to the Bastille Day parade last summer in France as the guest of President Macron. I think that Trump was impressed a little bit by a much smaller display of military showmanship, but during a welcome ceremony in Beijing, where I was with him there with Xi Jinping, and there was marching of all the troops past him. He's expressed that. He's obviously shown great level of sort of public displays of support for the military, for veterans, for the flag. This is the president who talks a lot about those things. So I think it dovetails into that. There's a lot of pushback, though, that this is not something Americans, presidents have supported regularly. I think the last version of this might have been 1991 under George H.W. Bush. But I think, there's a lot of planning that would have to go into this and a lot of money that it would cost to give heavy artillery, and tanks maybe rolling through the streets of Washington. And whether that sends the right message to the world, I don't know. But I think it's, what was interesting about our story that broke yesterday on this is that it went from Trump sort of saying publicly he'd like one to apparently the White House giving a signal to the military chiefs that they need to start planning one. And that's where the news is now, and we'll see what happens. All
right. Love to sit in that planning committee and see exactly how that goes down. David Nakamura, thank you so much for joining us, David.